Welcome and thank you for joining us for the annual State of the Region address held virtually for the second year in a row, for many of us from our home offices. Before we get started, let us acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. And we also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and Indigenous people, both in shaping and strengthening this region in particular, and our province and country as a whole. The State of a Region is a collaborative effort of business organizations, and we are pleased to be joined virtually by board leaders and staff executives from the Niagara Industrial Association, the Niagara Home Builders Association, the Niagara Construction Association, and the Chambers of Commerce for Grimsby and District and Lincoln. It is a privilege and honor to partner with you. We also would like to extend our thanks to organizations and businesses who made today possible. We are better with you by our sides. Our appreciation goes to our title sponsor, PenFinancial Credit Union, Electra, Deloitte, Northern Biotech Corporation, Walker Industries, Niagara Regional Broadband Network, FedCap Canada, UTV, Move 105.7, Newstalk 610 CKTB. Our thanks to all of you. This event is recorded and will be available on UTV and to all attendees in the upcoming days. We are 14 months into COVID-19 pandemic, and while the rollout of the vaccines give us hope, the times that we're living in are still uncertain. And it is clear that no government or organization has all the answers. We have gathered here today for the State of the Region to look at how this pandemic will change how we live, how we work, and how our municipalities will function. How has this impacted our corporate partnerships, our supply chains, and international affairs? And how will it reshape our collective values and priorities across Niagara? It is so critical for us to convene for conversations like the ones that we're having today, dialogues that encourage us to stretch our minds while determining how to best move forward. The decisions that we are going to make here in Niagara in the upcoming weeks and months will be the foundation of our economic recovery. And to start out, here's a brief message from Electra, whose mission is to provide customers with smart and simple energy choices while creating sustainable value for shareholders, customers, communities, and employees. And now it's my privilege to give you a brief overview of what the next hour and a half will look like. Following some introductory messages from our partner organizations, Niagara Regional Chair Jim Bradley will provide the official State of the Region address, followed by what is promising to be a very engaging panel discussion with Dr. Mustafa Hirji, Acting Medical Officer, Alicia MacDonald, Senior Economist with Deloitte, George Spezza, Director of Economic Development at the Niagara Region, and Phil Verster, President and CEO of Metrolinx. All of it being moderated by Julie Rorison, Chair of the Greater Niagara Chambers Wind Council, and also the Chair of the Women's Leadership Summit. And here's a message from our title sponsor, PenFinancial, whose truly local commitment is the heart and soul of their philosophy, where they believe that the prosperity of their members and our community go hand in hand. And we couldn't agree more.
Hey there, Niagara. Thanks for joining us. When PenFinancial sponsors a fantastic, truly local event like State of the Region, it gives us an opportunity to chat with you about the things we've been up to. But there is enough going on in our lives right now, so I'm not going to take that time to talk to you about checking accounts. Instead, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about how, together, we can make a difference in Niagara. As a values-based credit union and a proud B Corporation, we believe in using business for good, whether that is by paying all of our employees a living wage or by investing back into the communities we serve through our truly local commitment. For many households, the ongoing restrictions of COVID-19 have put even more stress on their ability to make ends meet. Recognizing this need in our community, we felt it was time to step in and help. So I am honored to announce that PenFinancial is donating $25,000 in emergency funds to be distributed to various local organizations to support critical food shortages and provide emergency resources across Niagara. If you are able, I encourage you to also think how you might be able to give back to your community, whether it's through a small act of kindness to let someone know you're thinking about them, or perhaps by helping at one of the local organizations that are working so hard to make sure our residents are supported. This has been an incredibly difficult year, so a little kindness and generosity will go a long way, perhaps now more than ever. Thank you for taking the time to listen about how you can make a difference in your community. And now, it is my sincere pleasure to introduce Regional Chair Jim Bradley. Jim Bradley was elected as Niagara Regional Chair on December 6, 2018. Previously, Chair Bradley served as a St. Catharines City Councillor from 1970 to 1977, and as a member of Provincial Parliament for St. Catharines from 1977 all the way up to 2018. During this time, he held roles as a Provincial Minister of Environment, Transportation, Municipal Affairs and Housing, Tourism and Recreation, Community Safety and Correctional Services, and Seniors. Before entering politics, Chair Bradley was a teacher with the Lincoln County Board of Education. He has contributed to the Niagara community as a hockey and baseball coach, manager, and referee, a member of Grantham Optimist Club, and as an active supporter of the Rank and Run, Jillian's Place, Start Me Up Niagara, Community Care, Bethlehem Place, and other volunteer organizations. Please join me in welcoming Regional Chair Jim Bradley.
When I think about Niagara, I think about how the sum of our differences enriches our community. I think about the steadfast strength of the farmer, a farmer who realizes that prosperity in the future is tied to protecting the present. I think about the dedication of the vintner using Niagara's resources to produce global recognition in a glass. When I think about Niagara, I think about the innovation of the entrepreneur driven with purpose, who sees what could be and hustles to make it a reality. When I think about Niagara, I think about the heart of the host eager to entertain, their love for home and making all feel welcome, bringing people and communities closer together. When I think about Niagara, I think about the experience of the retiree, who in their golden years chose Niagara as the setting to play, to connect, and to love where they live. When I think about Niagara, I think about the scholar and the infinite directions they can take, the teachers who inspire them, guide them, the hope they have for a brighter future. When I think about Niagara, I think about the selflessness of the caregiver, how their empathy and sacrifice strengthens our community, how their care rejuvenates. When I think about Niagara, I think about the vulnerability of the artist, whose work allows us to see one another more clearly, see ourselves more clearly, whose passion transcends language and culture. When I think about Niagara, I think of my neighbors, whose contributions make up a colorful and vibrant place to live, a community that cultivates equity and prosperity. When I think about Niagara, I think about the child, who has everything they need right in their own backyard and may not even know it. When I think about Niagara, I think about how Niagara was born out of a vision of singularity for a brighter future, where everyone will have a place to call home, where we will continue to invest in our communities, and where we will always take care of each other. We are resilient. We are innovative. We are Niagara.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be here with you today virtually for my third State of the Region address. I want to thank everyone who has taken time out of their busy schedules to participate. I want to start my remarks today by thanking both the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event, as well as all of the generous sponsors who make it possible. This address is an important opportunity that allows us to reflect on the past year, as well as spend some time focusing on what is still before us. I also want to thank our partners at Brock University for generously offering us the Sean O'Sullivan Theatre as a venue for this address. The university continues to be a valued partner during these challenging times, and I want to acknowledge their contribution. Finally, I want to also express my thanks to you, the Chamber members. Having an opportunity to communicate directly with so many members of the business community is crucial as we continue our efforts to rebuild our local economy in a way that works for everyone. When we look back at the last 13 months, we have to acknowledge some of our losses. At last count, over 375 Niagara residents have died as a result of COVID-19. These individuals were part of our community. They were our neighbors, our friends, and our family members. It can be easy to get lost in the cold statistics of this pandemic, but we have to remember that real people have lost their lives. We also have to remember that the pandemic has also had a significant impact on our collective mental health. Feelings of isolation, anxiety, and depression are all too common as we live through another round of lockdowns. We've also learned that this pandemic has not impacted everyone equally. Women have been more greatly affected, with the majority of frontline positions being occupied by females. At the same time, the coronavirus has driven women out of the labor market, as they shoulder the majority of childcare responsibilities. In fact, a recent RBC economic report noted women's participation in the workforce is now at 55%, the lowest rate since the 1980s. When we talk about recovery, we must keep these facts in mind and work to build a more equitable economy. But for many watching today, the economic impacts of the pandemic are top of mind. I want to start by highlighting a few key facts. A recent survey of local Niagara businesses found that 1 in 2 companies have laid off staff, and the estimated financial losses will total over $7.5 billion for the entire region. Only 6% of local businesses report doing well through the pandemic. And while we do not yet know the full impact of the pandemic, we do know that there are some businesses that will never open their doors again. As a municipal government, we have taken numerous steps to help our business community. In the early days of the pandemic, the region's Economic Development Department took swift action to aggregate information for local businesses regarding government support programs, including grants and loans. We also worked with partners to produce a directory that promoted local businesses who are selling much-needed PPE. The region's advocacy efforts to senior levels of government culminated in the Tourism Adaptation and Recovery Grant Program, which provided a total of over $2 million to help Niagara tourism businesses. These grants were administered by the region's Economic Development Department, being distributed to support those most in need. A full and complete recovery will ultimately require the cooperation of all levels of government in partnership with the private sector. While municipalities have limited tools at their disposal, Niagara's municipalities have been using all of their resources to support businesses at every opportunity, including the deferral of property taxes, the elimination of fees for businesses and patio licenses, allowing patio extensions and street closures, expediting approvals, and licensing processes, and bolstering numerous buy local campaigns. The Niagara region, in partnership with the 12 local municipalities, continues to advocate to the provincial and federal government to secure additional funds for our local businesses. Rest assured that we will continue to stand with you and advocate where we can. Despite all of our struggles, there are also signs of light at the end of Niagara's economic tunnel. For example, investment in building construction remains strong across the region despite the pandemic. 2020 saw the second highest year on record for investment values, totaling more than $1.6 billion. This indicates that businesses continue to have strong confidence in Niagara and feel safe to continue investing in projects. I'm pleased to report that 2021 has seen this trend continue. In terms of permit values, 2020 actually surpassed 2019 by about $50 million, indicating that investment in building construction will continue well into this year. Yes, it is true that Niagara's gross domestic product has declined by $1.2 billion. However, this is a direct result of the pandemic restrictions, and models suggest that our GDP is expected to rebound rapidly once the economy is reopened. Many economists have suggested that pent-up demand for hospitality and tourism will benefit regions like ours once the worst of the pandemic has subsided. It's important to remember that municipalities were not immune to the financial pressures of the pandemic. The region, in partnership with the 12 area municipalities, participated in lobbying efforts with other communities across Ontario to secure critical financial relief from the provincial government. Ultimately, tens of millions of dollars have been provided to Niagara through provincial and federal programs, ensuring both sustainable program delivery and limiting the impact on your property tax bills. As regional chair, I've maintained a strong and cooperative relationship with Municipal Affairs Minister Steve Clark, who has been responsive to the needs of Niagara and indeed all municipalities. I also keep in close contact with our local members of provincial and federal parliament, who have proven to be effective advocates and willing partners with the Niagara region. In reflecting on the region's response to the pandemic, I have to mention how honored I am to represent an organization of professionals that collectively rolled up their sleeves and continued to provide world-class service during one of the most challenging times in our 50-year history. A recent study found that 96% of our staff are tasked with providing what KPMG deemed to be mandatory or essential public services. During a pandemic, the importance of these services is highlighted, and I have witnessed firsthand our staff making sacrifices to ensure regional services continue to be provided to our residents and businesses. It has also been a privilege to work with members of Regional Council who have the best interest of the people they represent in Niagara at all times. I'm truly fortunate to work with such a dedicated group of individuals. My last thought on the pandemic is one of optimism. When I delivered last year's State of the Region address, I did not imagine that we would have not only one, but 4 effective vaccines to combat COVID-19. To date, we have administered well over 100,000 shots, including 100% of residents living in long-term care homes and other high-risk settings. With our partners in Niagara Health and our local pharmacies, the vaccine is available in all of our communities. Yes, there are times that the provincial booking system gets overwhelmed or other logistical issues may cause delay. But if the supply continues, we anticipate that every eligible adult will receive their first dose by the end of June. This is much welcome news and a positive step in our fight against COVID-19. While Council's response to the pandemic remained our top priority, it was also necessary to ensure that the business of the Niagara region moved forward. Although it may seem like a lifetime ago, the region's new waste collection contract started in October of last year. Thinking of the previous few years, late collection was all too frequent, and service levels were not where the residents of Niagara deserve them to be. Since October, collections have nearly always been on time, and I believe residents are seeing a better value for their tax dollars. I'm also pleased to reiterate that every person working to collect our curbside waste is earning a living wage. This decision helps to ensure higher quality services for residents while providing reasonable compensation for those hardworking individuals. This term of council also made the courageous decision to follow the science and help protect our environment by moving to every other week collection of garbage. By making this policy decision, we reinforce the use of the green bins, increasing our diversion rates and avoiding more methane being put into the environment. Let me highlight some impressive statistics. Since moving to every other week collection, we have seen a 16% decrease in garbage set out at the curb, while at the same time seeing a 34% increase in green bin usage and a 12% increase in blue and gray box usage. In raw numbers, nearly 5,000 tons of waste has been diverted from our landfills, helping to protect our natural environment. Looking back at 2020, the year could best be defined by the COVID-19 pandemic and the collective movement to focus on equity and inclusivity. Here in Niagara, we started that process by having the region and 12 area municipalities collectively sign a declaration to join the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities, committing us to a higher standing going forward. The region also made an investment in hiring our first project manager of inclusion, diversity, and equity to take a hard look at our practices to ensure everyone is being treated fairly. And through the work of the Women's Advisory Committee, Regional Council continues to make sure more diverse viewpoints are considered when creating policy. This term of council has also taken progressive strides to address housing and homelessness in Niagara. We demonstrated leadership by voting to better integrate Niagara region housing with our Community Services Department, streamlining service delivery for residents and making better use of taxpayer resources. Most recently, the pandemic allowed regional staff to implement more effective forms of housing supports that far surpass what is found in a typical shelter. By professionally delivering services based on best practices, 24 Niagara residents who have been homeless for years now have a permanent place to call home. Through our effective advocacy with the provincial government and in partnership with the City of Niagara Falls, the region successfully secured the capital funding required to make this program and others permanent. We will continue to tackle this issue for the remainder of the term through both advocacy with the provincial and federal governments and by making local investments. Niagara is also ready to host the nation with the 2022 Canada Summer Games. The pandemic-related delay is allowing us to ensure Niagara's Games will be like no other, with over $100 million of legacy infrastructure being invested in our region. The Summer Games will not only play an important role in our COVID-19 economic recovery, it will also provide incredible community assets that will be utilized for generations. This term of council continued to build on our past successes by connecting all 12 municipalities through expanded intermunicipal transit. To accomplish this welcome expansion, the region utilized an innovative on-demand transit model that makes use of passenger vans instead of conventional routes that require a 40-foot bus. This service is scalable and cost-efficient, providing the ideal balance between service provision and cost effectiveness. These expansions will play an important role in ensuring seamless connections between the highly anticipated GO train stations and our local service. While it goes without saying that pandemic recovery will remain our top priority, I want to highlight some other items that I believe are worthy of Council's attention during the balance of this term. As many of you know, work is already well underway to hire a permanent Chief Administrative Officer for the organization. Prior to the pandemic, Council collectively agreed this decision would be one of the most important. I remain committed to ensuring this hiring process is conducted in a fully ethical and transparent manner. I look forward to announcing the successful candidate later this summer, and then getting to work right away. Significant progress is being made on efforts to amalgamate public transit across the region. Improved public transit is good for our passengers as well as our local economy, as it makes our region more competitive to potential site selectors. Getting people to and from work is crucial, and I support any reasonable effort that improves our ability to attract and retain new private sector investments in Niagara. As we move into the second half of this term, I will continue to champion the need for balance in regard to development and natural environment. Niagara's natural heritage was recently recognized with the TVO documentary, Tripping the Niagara. Almost 3 hours in length, it highlights the natural attributes that make Niagara both unique and attractive to visitors and investors alike. I believe the region's upcoming official plan should strive to find a fair mix between promotion of responsible growth and development while protecting this natural heritage. I believe it is the diversity of our region, the green space and the urban areas, that make us such a desirable location. I would also argue that we must take steps to protect the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority from any legislation that may undermine its effectiveness. This term will also see us work towards an updated development charges bylaw. It is my desire to see a bylaw that ensures we continue to be a competitive location for investment, while also making sure that growth is paying for growth. Our local businesses and homeowners cannot afford to subsidize new development, and I look forward to seeing a bylaw that positions Niagara to be competitive among our peers. As many of you know, the province's governance review ended up with no changes being made, but with a challenge being put forward to municipalities to find efficiencies. Through service reviews, in part paid for by money made available by the province of Ontario, we've identified a list of areas that would be prime candidates for shared service agreements between the region and 12 area municipalities. While this work was sidetracked due to the pandemic, I look forward to seeing expedited progress in the coming months as we look for ways to be more cost-effective for our taxpayers. When I ran for Regional Council in 2018, a global pandemic was the last thing on my mind. While no one will dispute the negative effects of the last 13 months, we've also seen some of the best our community has to offer. When I think of Niagara, I think of the immensely positive impact that a single resident, business, or nonprofit organization can have on our community. To this end, I'm pleased to announce that nominations are now open for the new Regional Chairs Impact Awards. I'm calling on all Niagarans to consider nominating those in your community who have made a real difference over the last 13 months. I look forward to reviewing your submissions in the coming weeks and selecting those that went above and beyond to make Niagara a better place in which to live. In closing, I want to thank you for spending your precious time with us today. I hope that these remarks have provided you with some insight into the current state of the region and where I hope that we can go together as a community. As we continue to recover and rebuild, it is my intent to do so in the spirit of partnership and collaboration. Thank you.
This is Norgen Biotech. We are a biotechnology manufacturing company based in Thorold, Ontario, Canada. This has been a busy year for us, with plans in motion to expand our facility, as well as producing testing kits for COVID-19. The people of Norgen have been working hard to serve their community. Now let's go see what the people of Norgen are up to. Hey Pam, do you mind telling us what you do here at Norgen?
Hi, sure. So I'm the Quality Assurance and Regulatory Manager at Norgen. So I oversee our ISO certifications, our quality management system, as well as work on regulatory submissions for our products with Health Canada, FDA, CEIVD as well.
Let's go to the lab to talk to our scientists.
I'm a research scientist, and I'm going to isolate the RNA from all the sample that we received to be sent for sequencing.
I am a researcher on our NGS team, and my job is to take the RNA that we isolate in the lab put it on the sequencer, and then send it upstairs for analysis.
Let's head up to bioinformatics then, shall we?
I'm a bioinformatician here, and we analyze all the sequencing data based on customer needs.
This is only a portion of the work being done at Norgen. While each of these departments is essential to our success, we're thankful for our team in manufacturing for making our work possible. Although we make hundreds of kits, we'd like to focus your attention on what we are currently working on, which is our saliva collection device, as well as what we are doing to facilitate COVID-19 testing.
COVID-19 detection all starts with the sample. The sample can be collected through saliva or swab, is preserved and shipped to our lab. Once it's received by our lab, we isolate it using our silicon carbide technology. The samples then undergo PCR testing for the detection of COVID-19, which can be further analyzed by our NGS team.
The Ontario government was very instrumental during this pandemic, and it supported businesses across the province. We also get support for developing our novel saliva collection and preserving device.
Thank you, Dr. Hodge. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.
Good morning. My name is Chuck McShane, and I'm the Executive Officer of the Niagara Home Builders Association. I would like to thank the GNCC for hosting the State of the Region address and for inviting me to introduce our esteemed panel of speakers that will be joining Chair Bradley today. Leading the discussion will be Julie Rorison. Julie is a lifelong Niagara resident and Brock University graduate, where she's currently working as a manager of community relations on secondment from her role as Chief of Staff in the Mayor's office at the City of St. Catharines. Julie has a master's degree from McMaster University in Public Policy and International Relations. She brings her skills and leaderships to several local organizations as president of the Board of Directors for the YWCA Niagara, founder of the Niagara Leadership Summit for Women, and chair of the WIN Council of Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Mustafa Hirji is the acting Chief Medical Officer of Health for the Niagara region and was appointed to the position in January 2018. In this capacity, he is responsible for protecting the health of Niagara's 450,000 residents and 15 million visitors through public health programs. Dr. Hirji holds an MD from the University of Calgary and a Master's of Public Health in Epidemiology from the University of Toronto. He completed specialty training through McMaster University, earning a specialty certificate in public health and preventative maintenance from the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. Phil Verster is the President and Chief Executive Officer at Metrolinx. Prior to joining Metrolinx, Phil was one of the UK's rail leaders, having managed train operations, infrastructure builds, and infrastructure management for passenger rail systems in England, Scotland, and Ireland. Phil has a Bachelor's of Engineering and Master's in Engineering, both from the University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. He has an MBA from the University of Newcastle Business School and an LLM postgraduate diploma from the University of Northumbria. George Spezza brings with him more than 20 years of experience in the economic development sector, and in his role will be responsible for leading Niagara's economic development team. The team promotes Niagara on a global scale and works in partnership with the region's 12 local area municipalities to provide effective, innovative service that encourage investment in the region. Over his career, Spezza has focused on business retention and expansion, community economic development, and investment marketing within a municipal setting. Most recently, he held the position of Senior Advisor, Business and Strategic Relations at Crosslink Transit Solution, focused on the Eglinton Crosstown LRT expansion project. Prior to this, he held the position of Director of Business Growth and Services within the City of Toronto's Economic Development and Culture Office. Alicia MacDonald is a manager in the Economic Advisory Practice at Deloitte Canada, based in Ottawa. Alicia has over 15 years of professional experience as an economist with specializations in forecasting, economic metric modeling, economic impact studies, and policy analysis. Prior to joining the Economics and Policy Advisory Group, Alicia was the Associate Director of Economic Forecasting at the Conference Board of Canada. Alicia has extensive experience across a broad range of subjects, including projecting labor demand and supply, industry analysis, building econometric forecasting models, economic impact analysis, and using input-output models. Alicia has an MA in economics from the University of Victoria and an HB.Com degree in finance and economics from Lakehead University. We look forward to an engaging conversation. Now I'll pass it over to Julie after this brief message.
Good morning. My name is Julie Rorison, and I'm honored to facilitate today's discussion on the state of our region with you. I'd like to begin with some general questions, building on some of the themes from Chair Bradley's remarks, and touch on the hot topics of the last 24 hours as well. We'll wrap up with some questions from the audience, so please send them in the chat during our discussion. Now, we have a panel of professionals from very different backgrounds and international experience here with us today. So I would really like to hear from each of you on different topics, as we know that diverse views and different ideas coming together really lead to better outcomes. And that's going to be important as we aim to build back better. So first, let's talk a little bit about economic policy. We just heard from Chair Bradley about the state of our region here in Niagara, some of the economic trends, employment figures, building statistics, and social impacts of the pandemic. So I want to begin by asking you, Ms. MacDonald, everyone has suffered in this pandemic, all communities all around the world. It has really been a worldwide economic downturn. How is Niagara doing comparatively to other provinces and regions and even internationally? How are we doing?
Thanks, Julie. That's a great question. As you mentioned, we have seen significant economic impacts right across the globe from the pandemic, and that's because of the public health measures that have been necessary in order to bring this pandemic under control. When we look globally, we've seen the deepest economic downturn that we've seen in recent history. The IMF estimates that the global economy contracted by 3.3% last year. Now, Canada's impact was larger than that because the impacts that we saw in China and the US, the globe's two largest economies, weren't as deep. The US fell by around 3.5%, and China actually managed to grow by about 2.5% last year. So some pretty small relative impacts compared to what we saw in other areas of the country. Canada's GDP, as I said, was down about 5.5% last year. And even within the country, we saw some pretty disparate economic outcomes. When we look at Atlantic Canada, for example, they got their COVID situation under control relatively quickly. They were able to ease some of the public health measures and return to some of those social activities that many of us continue to miss in other parts of the country. So their economic impacts compared to Canada as a whole were relatively soft. Now, if we look out west, the provinces that are very energy dependent were really battling dual impacts. We saw the impact of the pandemic, but then also the crash in energy prices. And so Alberta and Saskatchewan, for example, experienced very significant declines in economic output last year because they were facing both of those impacts at the same time. Ontario's impact was relatively middle of the pack. Their decline in output, we estimate, was roughly in line with the Canadian average. But even when we look at within Ontario, there have been some very different impacts. Niagara specifically, it's very dependent on the hospitality sector. And so when you look at where the public health measures have had the largest economic impact, it's in those social interactions and those social activities. And because of that, the hospitality sector has really been impacted a lot more. than some of the other industries. As Chair Bradley mentioned, construction continued to do well. We expect the manufacturing sector, when we get the data, will show relatively soft declines. But the service sector, which is so important to the economy, really did suffer last year. The Conference Board estimates that real GDP was down 7.5% in the region last year, and that would rank it 26 out of 29 CMAs that they forecast. So some pretty big impacts in the region, unfortunately. But that does set it up for better growth prospects ahead as we get to the point where we can start looking at relaxing some of those measures once our vaccination progresses a bit more.
Well, thank you for that. That's really helpful context. And I think will influence some of the thoughts that we can have about ourselves going forward when we make some decisions about coming back and reopening. So I want to turn it over to you on this note, Mr. Spezza. In his speech, the chair shared some of the positive trends in building values and growth, which Alicia just mentioned as well. So how has the pandemic affected industrial and business demands in Niagara? Are we seeing a shift towards different types of businesses starting up and different types of businesses expanding? And if so, will this last?
Well, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Julie, for the question. And absolutely, as Alicia indicated, certainly the pandemic is no secret, has had a significant impact on Niagara region's economy. Our GDP is taking a significant hit, about 7%. And that's also, as across the board, across all sectors, including the industrial sector, has had its impacts. We have seen about a 40% drop in industrial construction in terms of demand for industrial or just industrial construction. But we also have seen a demand moving forward in terms of inquiries for industrial space, and so this is reassuring that there still is certainly some interest and demand in the regional economy. I think businesses have learned a significant lesson through this pandemic. Many of them have looked at how to retool, how to be more flexible, as opposed to traditionally focusing on productivity and efficiencies, and then looking more towards innovation and technology and how they can best resource some of those shift in economic crises. How to best move forward in terms of adapting to some of the crises. So I think, there has been some really good success stories in the region in terms of companies retooling and repositioning themselves to adapt to the pandemic, but also, we're also seeing some expansions of some manufacturing facilities in the region. And in particular, as Alicia indicated, our region is heavily dependent on the tourism sector. That has taken a significant reduction, and but in the tourism sector, through the hospitality or retail businesses, bricks and mortar retail, many of them have adopted to e-commerce strategies and looking at how those types of strategies can increase their business. So. Although we have seen certainly some impacts on our economy, I'm optimistic and looking forward that there'll be a quick recovery as we move through to the post-pandemic stage.
Thank you for that. I think those numbers hit really heavy, but I want to continue to pick up on that notion of optimism and some of the success stories that you've been seeing. And so I want to ask Chair Bradley about this. Can you elaborate? Can you tell us what you are hearing about new business coming to Niagara? You're often the first to hear about some trends and opportunities and what investments may be coming. What optimism can we look forward to?
Well, I'm very optimistic about the future. I don't sugarcoat the present circumstances we face because obviously COVID-19 has had a very bad impact on Niagara. But if you look at the hospitality and tourism industry, for instance, and you recall what happened with SARS back in 2003, the prospects were very poor then for recovery. But the provincial government, the federal government provided assistance to the industry, the tourism industry. It bounced back quickly. I'm encouraged because I think that we have all the natural assets here We have entrepreneurs here. We have business people here who are rebranding and refreshing. And people will obviously want to start traveling again. There's a lot of pent-up demand out there. If you talk to individuals at this time, they will tell you how they feel housebound and eager to get out to spend some of that money and to enjoy some of the opportunities they have in the past. So I'm quite optimistic that we're going to see people in that industry continue to develop, continue to refresh, and others will be here. The wine industry is very important to us as well, and I see it bouncing back considerably once COVID-19 is no longer the major factor. So I think we should be optimistic about that. We're an attractive part of the province. We're close to the U.S. border. We have good transportation, and I'm optimistic about the future and the people here who will make it happen.
That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing that optimism. I want to continue talking a little bit more about tourism. It's a key economic driver for Niagara. We know this. And in the pandemic, it has been all but completely shut down. So first to you, Mr. Spezza, how will we succeed in diversifying our economy for the future?
Well, it's very important. I think, we certainly, as indicated previously, our tourism industry and hospitality industry are very prominent industry sector for the region. But we have a diversified economy in Niagara. We have a healthy and robust manufacturing and agricultural sector. And I think that, with moving forward, it's important for us to continue to diversify our economy. When you have a diversification in your economy, certainly are better suited to weather economic crises. And you've seen, through this pandemic, how disproportionately we've been more affected in our GDP and our output from other regions because we're so heavily reliant on tourism. But we want to continue to move forward and continue to support our tourism sector, support our existing manufacturing and agricultural sector. And we want to be out there proactively, internationally, globally, around the world. We have an amazing brand in Niagara, and it's important for us to continue to brand Niagara and promote Niagara globally to attract new investment over and above tourism, manufacturing, and agri-food business. We want to explore how do we advance the technology innovation sector as well? How do we advance the health sciences sector? So I think the more we can diversify our economy and promote Niagara and attract those types of investments, I think the better we will be moving forward.
Ms. MacDonald, I want to ask you about this topic of tourism as well. You mentioned some stats and figures and how the impact of the pandemic has really been somewhat different across the country while we look from east to west. Do you have any other lessons or trends from other heavily dominant tourism regions, tourism economies that we should be looking at as we look to reopen and rebuild and get people back to work? What do other communities that rely on tourism, what are they looking at and talking about?
Yeah, no, the impact on tourism-dependent economies has been really significant. If we look at the Caribbean, for example, where tourism is the dominant industry, not just one of many that contribute, like you have in Niagara, the real GDP declines last year were in excess of 15% in a lot of those countries. So really impactful from this crisis. When we look at building back, I think some of the supports that we saw in the federal government budget yesterday, and then the supports that we saw in the Ontario budget last month are really going to be helpful because the fact is that until we're able to socialize and gather in larger groups, the tourism industry is going to be held back because they simply aren't able to either operate or operate at the same capacity they were prior to the crisis. So it really is our collective effort to get the pandemic under control that will allow for that sector of the economy to start building back better.
Some more important context, thank you. Okay, so the other hot topic of the day is about childcare and women's role in the recovery. And today I'm here representing Women in Niagara, the Women's Advisory Council of the GNCC, where we've been talking about women's employment and entrepreneurship and issues like childcare for years. And over the last year, more and more Canadians have been taking up this conversation around the dinner table, the boardroom table, and now at government decision-making tables. So it's really exciting to us to be having this moment of opportunity and be a part of that. We've seen the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Deloitte, who we have on the call with us today, see RBC, economists of all stripes have been talking about childcare and economic recovery. It is the topic of conversation. It is not just a women's issue, not a social issue, but now an economic issue and a business issue. And while the federal government's budget will be debated over the coming weeks, and they've set out an ambitious national program that will take some time to open up, I want to start by asking our economists about this. So Ms. MacDonald and Mr. Spezza, I'll start with you. Regardless of what other levels of government are doing, what can we do in Niagara to get women back to work and to prevent this from becoming a prolonged she-session? What are some local policy options to support women in business? And what can the business sector itself be doing? Ms. MacDonald?
As we talked about at the beginning of this panel, the impact of the recession has really been felt disproportionately by women. And the Statistics Canada surveys have pointed out that it is because of the childcare issue that brought women out of the workforce during the pandemic, because there simply wasn't anyone to care for the children when schools and daycares were shut down during the first wave. When we look at bringing more women into the workforce, the childcare announcement, it's huge. If you look across the country at the average cost of daycare, it can range from between $1,200 to $1,800 a month. When we're looking at getting to $10 a day, that it has a phenomenal impact on families' decisions, and particularly women's decisions to get into the workforce. When we look beyond childcare, though, at policies that can encourage more women participating in the labor market and avoiding these C-session impacts lasting a long time, I think there's two main avenues we can look at. The first is the type of jobs that women go into. One of the reasons why the impacts were so strong on women during this recession is they tend to hold a lot of those lower paying frontline jobs. And so programs that get into the school system and encourage women to get into a broader field of occupational fields would be a good start. And then here at Deloitte, I know we have women mentorship programs. And so even women coming out of school, we try to pair them with professional women to give them guidance and open up networking opportunities and really help facilitate their career development. And I think that's an important tool that can be easily applied anywhere.
That's great. Thank you. Mr. Spezza, I know that this came up at committee last week, and also that the region is embarking on a 10-year economic development strategy. So how are you going to be looking at this issue?
Yes, that's correct. So, first and foremost, we need women back in the workforce. It is imperative to have, to raise that number, 55% of women in the workforce, to raise that percentage. It is important, having women in the workforce is an important economic driver for the region and for the country in general. So, things that we can do. One of the things that we're committed to in Niagara Economic Development is we're committed to we're just starting to embark on a 10-year economic development strategy that help us to raise and lift us out of the pandemic, and really start to map out what that's going to look like. One of the key areas that we want to consult, because our data has shown us recently, our data that women have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, is how do we outreach to the women's groups across the region. We have a women's committee here at the region as well. So part of our stakeholder engagement, part of our process in going out and talking about our 10-year economic recovery is what are the key areas, what are the key priorities, what are some of the key pillars that we are going to want to address in our strategy. And that is a result of being able to go out and effectively hear from various groups, in particular women's groups, and other demographics that have been impacted by the pandemic. So we also would like to be able to identify in our strategy various tactics and initiatives to encourage women to come back into the workforce. Those are areas, as mentioned by Alicia, so areas of mentorship programs, workshop programs, having the ability to do some specific incubator type of activities to encourage women to come back into entrepreneurship areas. I think even generally from a workforce development perspective is for companies to offer that flexibility in working environments as well that would encourage women to come back into the workplace. So we are very keen. We see this as an area of real interest, and certainly hope to address that through our economic development strategy moving forward, and also really try to encourage, as I said earlier, to improve the conditions and encourage women to be back in our workforce.
That's good to hear. And it's good to hear that you're keen to have this conversation. And we at WIN Council and all the partners and groups that we work with will be happy to participate in any of those consultations and help you get the input that you're looking for. And before I go back to Dr. Hirji, I just want to ask if there's anyone else who would like to share some thoughts on this topic. It is the topic of the day. And if anyone has any other thoughts, any of our other panelists. Chair Bradley?
Well, there's no question that one of the profound impacts is going to be the movement toward more and more child care being central to the federal budget. And what is interesting to see and note, and I think everybody in the panel has noted, is the advocacy would have begun with women's organizations and women in politics, for instance, who would be advocating. Now we're seeing the business community and so many others who are understanding the importance of childcare, and it will allow more and more women to be in the workforce, as well as being able to accommodate them through such things as working at home or more flexible hours and so on, will be exceedingly important. We're looking forward to your organization and to our Women's Advisory Committee to provide us with even more information. And we're looking forward to particularly the provincial government, through the education system, encouraging women to get involved in non-traditional jobs that in the past they're not involved in to that great extent. We heard construction is doing exceedingly well right now, despite where we are in terms of the economy. We need more and more women involved in the construction industry. And I think they have found when women have been involved, they're every bit as capable as the men who are there. So those are the kinds of things I think we can do to encourage more and more women to be in the workforce. The last thing I would say is the availability now of all-day kindergarten and junior kindergarten has made a difference as well, that coming after the early childhood education. So all of those are important factors that can encourage women and allow for more women to be back in the workforce where they would like to be.
That's great. Thank you. Good to hear. Mr. Verster, it looks like you are, I'm not sure if we can't hear you. Do you want to weigh in on this topic?
Yes, please. If I can add to that.
Yes, please.
Over the last couple of years, we've set ourselves a target to get in our organization, which comes from a conventional male-dominated sort of construction type industry, what Chair Bradley is talking about. We set ourselves a target to increase our women in senior positions to 50%. And 3 years ago, when I joined Metrolinx, we were at around 25%. I'm glad to say we are now at 42% of senior leaders in our organization are women. And I think organizations are adjusting, as Chair Bradley says, are adjusting the whole orientation in terms of, we have looked at how we recruit and how we specify experience and how we are more gender neutral in terms of recruiting and selection, and it makes a huge difference. And women make a fantastic contribution to Metrolinx, and right from our board level down to our senior management team level, we have that gender balance, and it's the it's a really important front end of a diversity and inclusion strategy. So very supportive of what you in the region does. And I just thought I can see in my own organization the role that women play. They're fantastic.
That's great. Thank you. I think that gives us some real tangible tactics to think about. I've heard mentioned targets, mentorship, flexible work, training, workforce development, and consultation, hearing from folks. So I think those are some pretty easy action items to think about as we go forward. So thank you all for weighing in on that. It's something that we're obviously very passionate about at WIN and want to be here to help all the women in Niagara, entrepreneurs, business owners, get back to work as well, because we know that that will contribute meaningfully to our economic recovery and getting everyone back involved in the community. So thank you. And Dr. Hirji, I want to invite you into this conversation, talking about tourism as well. We've been talking about how it's such a huge part of our economy. It's also an important identifier of Niagara. We are a tourist destination. We are an international border town. We rely on international travel. We have cross-border businesses and even cross-border families. So I want to ask you, what indicators will it mean that it is safe to reopen the border? What signs should businesses and investors be looking for on this? We think about families as well. So can you give us any indicators to be watching for?
For sure. And if I may just quickly make a comment on the past discussion about the role of women. One of the things we've seen throughout this pandemic is it really widens the gap between some of the existing inequalities in our society. Whether it's by income or education, by race, or in this case, gender, it's unfortunately really caused some of those gaps to exacerbate. And one of the things we've been very focused on here in public health is we see education has actually been one of the things that helps equalize our society, which is why we've tried to really keep schools open. Recently we prioritized vaccination of education workers in hopes to do that. And particularly, I think that would have a great role in helping women hopefully get back into the workforce, because they've unfortunately been burdened more with some of the childcare duties when schools have been closed and children have had to be home. Moving on to the topic of the border, I think the border will open up once both sides of the border, both the US and Canada, can feel confident that we're not going to see infections spreading in either of our countries because we open that border. So I think the most important criteria is that we're both going to be looking that on the other side of the border, cases have come down to a controlled level and they're staying relatively flat. So I think that's the first most important criterion. I think the second thing everybody wants to make sure is that, those cases aren't going to then reseed, because it's not going to be at zero. We're not going to reseed new infections by having people traveling across the border. And so we'll probably be looking to have both sides of the border have relatively high vaccination coverage. We're in Niagara at about 26.9% as of this morning in terms of vaccination. So we're making progress there. So as we get closer to probably 70, 80%, I would think that both sides of the border will start to feel more comfortable. And then the last thing we'd probably be looking for is, are there particularly variants on either side of the border? Because that might be a great concern to one country to open up to let that variant start to travel over the other side. Once the border opens up, cases might be low, but there's going to be ups and downs still. And we want to make sure that there's no up driven by a variant that causes reseeding of variants on the other side. So the key things there is bringing cases down, getting vaccination up, and making sure we don't have a lot of variants around.
Thank you. That's helpful. And it's great to see that vaccine ticker go up every day here in Niagara. Kudos to all the workers who are working really around the clock to make sure that we all get safely vaccinated and are protected as best as possible. So moving forward, I want to talk a little bit about growth and development. And Chair Bradley, you spoke a little bit about this in your remarks. So I want to start with you. We see that Niagara is attracting global investment and becoming more and more diverse. We have Brock University and Niagara College in the region that are critical ingredients of our economic value proposition and attract thousands of international students and foreign-trained professionals each year to our region. And at the same time, we see the federal government has set ambitious new immigration targets and plans to support the economic recovery through immigration. So how can we ensure that newcomers to Niagara are part of the economic recovery and that they want to stay here, they want to invest, they want to build their businesses here and be a part of the future growth and prosperity in Niagara?
That's part of the role. That's part of the role that both Niagara College and Brock University can play through their faculties and through the other staff that are available at both those institutions to, in fact, encourage those who are foreign students to stay here and make a contribution. Both of those institutions have been highly reliant upon international students. And now the federal government is saying in its immigration policy that it's going to provide a pathway for those who've come over for educational purposes to be able to stay here. We obviously need people with an expertise in a number of different fields. And the fact that we are encouraging them to come to our university and our community college will make a profound difference. If there are opportunities here for jobs, obviously they're going to stay. In every province, you will see that students tend to gravitate to the large centers, the large population centers, whether you're in Alberta or Quebec or Ontario, wherever you happen to be. But more and more now, particularly with a circumstance where you don't necessarily have to be at a job site, in other words, remote learning in some cases, but remote involvement in the workforce is making a difference. And many of them may feel now that even if they're employed by an employer that's in a place such as Toronto or Ottawa, they're still able to participate through Zoom and other methods. So they don't have to then be involved in the awful commute that people don't want to be involved in. And our local institutions have to be welcoming as well. We have a folk arts council here that works with individuals who are from other countries and make them feel more welcome here in Niagara. So all of those things point to the fact that some may well want to stay here, but I think the people who work with those institutions alone, with Brock and Niagara College, can have a major impact on the future plans of those students. And we look forward to having them here in Niagara because they're going to play a huge role in our communities as time goes on.
Definitely. And Dr. Hirji, I want to ask you specifically about this from the healthcare perspective, because we've seen that foreign trained professionals have really stepped up in the call to service and part of the healthcare response to the pandemic. So what have you seen from your perspective, from healthcare, and about how we can utilize newcomers and better integrate newcomers into our community and economy, perhaps by working together with the educational institutions?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a role to work with educational institutions to help integrate these individuals more. I think the one other area that could really help would be actually some of the licensing requirements that we have for health professionals, which often haven't actually made it easy for people who've trained outside of Canada to actually get licensed and to be able to work here in Canada. Obviously, we want to make sure that everybody coming here from elsewhere still meets the high standards that we have in Canada, but perhaps there's more that we can do to actually improve some of those pathways to bring licensing easier to get to those individuals, as well as maybe putting in place some programs to actually help people along with some of those licensing requirements so they have all of that in place.
Mm-hmm. I think these are themes that will continue to be discussed at other levels of government as well. So thank you for your input. I want to pivot now and talk a little bit about housing, because this is another hot topic that everyone in Niagara is talking about. Housing and the real estate market, prices that have skyrocketed, real estate and bidding wars like we've never seen before in Niagara. And yet affordable housing is needed now more than ever. And in this conversation, I want to talk about affordable housing in the sense that we're not just talking about socialized housing or government-funded housing, but affordable for folks across the income spectrum and lifestyles. So Chair Bradley, give us an idea about what new policies and incentives are coming and are here now, and what new builds in the region will help address this demand for affordable housing.
As we work on our official plan, the encouragement will be for more intensification. That sometimes meets with some opposition, but I think it's a way for the future. We can't put a wall up around Niagara and say people cannot come here and live in this area. We're quite attractive for others. You see a great migration from the Greater Toronto area into Niagara and other areas outside of Toronto. What we have to do in terms of future builds is ensure that as a component of a major development that there be a segment for affordable housing. You can do that either through incentives provided to developers to ensure that part of the development is in fact affordable to people of lower incomes, or you can simply make it a rule. The incentives usually work better, but if the rule is necessary, we'll have it there as well. In terms of housing, you mentioned affordable housing and how other levels of government can play a role. We have to work in conjunction with them, and with both the federal and provincial government, they have programs which will assist us in municipalities to build affordable housing. I know that's not where you're placing the emphasis now, but that's still important to have that kind of funding coming from the federal and provincial government. And I note in the recent budgets of the provincial and federal government that there's a component there for affordable housing. It's recognized as well, and Dr. Hirji would certainly confirm this, that one of the determinants of good health is in fact housing. We also have a homelessness problem, which requires some special programs, which involves not only the provision of the building itself, the housing itself, but also supports for those who are encountering great difficulties. So all of that as a combination, I think, will have an impact on what is happening in terms of the availability of housing. But the old days when you could simply spread out as far as you wanted are really gone now. And I think developers have recognized that years ago. I think now elected representatives are beginning to understand that as being a significant component as well.
Definitely. So I want to ask Ms. MacDonald about this as well. So you've heard in the chair's remarks, and I mean, it doesn't escape any of us living anywhere in Canada these days that the affordable housing crisis and real estate market it's an issue. What ripple effect does this have on the broader economy?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen housing prices right across the country just soar, and that's economics 101, demand and supply. We've seen a lack of supply coming into the market, and then this huge demand as people are looking for more space, they're looking for home offices, and so this disconnect is creating quite an affordable housing crisis across the country. And while it's been helping to fuel our economic growth through 2020, that housing demand, it does come with some negative externalities. The lack of household affordability can deter newcomers from coming into an area. And as we've discussed over the past 45 minutes, that really is a potential future engine for growth for the region, attracting immigrants to the region and keeping them there. And so affordable housing is very important. It can crowd out productivity, enhancing investments in other sectors of the economy as companies pivot to provide housing instead of other types of investments. It can exacerbate income inequality since older generations are the ones typically benefiting from the high housing prices right now. And people who are getting into the housing market too, they're having to spend so much more money and take on so much more debt in order to get into the market that eventually we're going to see that translate into softer consumer spending. Interest rates are low now, and that's one of the drivers of the housing market boom. But eventually they are going to rise, and households are sitting on trillions of dollars in mortgage debt. And those interest payments, when they start to go up, will crowd out spending in other areas of the economy. So it really is a situation that policymakers, I think, need to start paying some attention to.
Definitely. And I know that this is something that is on the radar of decision makers at the regional level and, of course, provincially as well. So we'll keep this conversation going. But related to the way that we live and the way that we build is our transportation network. And while we've certainly been affected in the last year or so by not having to commute to work every day, and the way that we work has changed, we're still thinking and planning for the future of transportation. So I want to ask Mr. Verster here, because anytime the business community has come together over the last 5+ years, we've talked about GO trains. And the arrival of GO train service to Niagara, when that announcement was made, it was the most eagerly awaited development in this region in a long time, except maybe eclipsed by the arrival of vaccinations now. So To put you on the spot, is the GO train still coming to Niagara? And what can we expect in terms of development and growth around that corridor when it happens?
Yeah, Julie, that's that's a great question. So I'm at work today. I'm dressed for meeting one of my teams this afternoon on an operational site. And this is perhaps the good news I want to share, is that during the COVID year that we've just had, we have still delivered. We've been open for business, as you know, running GO services. But more importantly, we've delivered more than $4.5 billion of capital infrastructure work. And we've continued to invest, and we continue to make progress with strengthening our GO backbone system that can run services to a number of new locations. We are super excited about our service options to extend services from Oshawa down to Bowmanville, which is a great initiative. Similarly, to extend services into the Kitchener region, and also to build the capacity to extend service into the Niagara region. And the region would probably know that in January 2019, when we ran the first weekday services, we did that 4 years early. And unfortunately, during the COVID period, we had to curtail that again. And since then, all of our focus has been to continue to strengthen what I would call the backbone of the GO services. And that's about, if you think of capacity bottlenecks, Lakeshore West is our busiest corridor, but it's also the corridor that serves the Niagara region. We've got fantastic investments that we completed in the last year there. Bayview Junction, which is in Hamilton, is sort of on that curvature where it comes around, Lakeshore West comes around the Hamilton corner. We have implemented signaling solutions there that increase capacity. So a lot of exciting stuff and infrastructure that will be necessary in a post-COVID world, because the post-COVID world is going to look different. The world is going to be about frequent, shorter trains. We are very close to businesses across the region, and we see a trend. I see a trend of more decentralization away from downtown Toronto. We see head offices move to places like Pickering, and Burlington and Hamilton and places like that. And I expect that in the future, two-way travel along the GO corridor is going to be prevalent. I see many more opportunities for cities, everything Hamilton, Grimsby, St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, to have more ridership that connects, where people work in Niagara Falls and take a train from Hamilton in the morning. That's the market I'm planning for in the years to come, and that's the type of capacity we're investing in. So clearly an exciting couple of years ahead, but COVID is going to make things different for us all.
Definitely. So some room for optimism, definitely some irreversible changes, but it sounds like some of those trends in decentralization and greater two-way integration may actually be beneficial for us. So picking up on that comment about investing in the backbone, as we heard from the chair, he described some of the most recent changes and investments in local transit that Niagara has made to be able to support that integration with GO Transit, to be the local backbone of our local transit infrastructure. Can I ask you, what are some of the best practices for achieving a strong multimodal public transit network and that will integrate with GO, that will support that new approach and decentralized transportation network? What are some best practices we need to be looking at, Mr. Verster?
Yeah, Julie, it's a great question. It's unreservedly say that collaboration with the region and the cities in the region in the 3 years that I've been here has been fabulous. There's no lack of collaboration, no lack of integrating the services. The rub of it, the real rub of it, is frequency. Transit, public transit, without frequency is really a difficult choice for consumer to exercise. And this is why this whole discussion about how important it is to get backbone invested in, why I've been so excited about extending services to places like Bowmanville. I love the idea of extending services to Bowmanville, to Kitchener, and to Niagara Falls, because and this is why we did it in 2019 to Niagara Falls. The moment you get a service out there, there's something in transit, and especially in railways, it's a sort of a build it and they will come type of world. Custom developed once they see opportunities to use the service really. And that's why we started to run, even though it was a relatively small service, but from January 2019 ran the weekday service. After COVID and things lift up again, I think what we are trying to do across all of the GO network is get frequency of services up. When you get the frequency up, you give more opportunities for local transit to integrate. You get more opportunities for customer to use and to believe in a service that's going to meet the requirement. And Julie, the real economic benefit when customers start to see the opportunities comes from that travel pattern that's then established. Because when I look at our journey times throughout the Toronto and Hamilton area, Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, our journey times reduce the time that people sit in traffic, automobile traffic or car traffic. It provides people with more personal time when they can sit and work. We have free Wi-Fi on our trains and on our buses, more time to work, more time to relax. This is the model for the future.
Well, thank you for sharing that update. I think that's affirming and positive outlook for folks to take away. And I know we had an audience question about that as well, so thank you. So I wanted to ask one more question. We have a few more minutes left, specifically about what the business community can do to help with the next stages in reopening and recovery and vaccination. So this question is for you, Dr. Hirji. But before I do, I want to first say very big thank you to you and through you to all of the healthcare workers and the frontline workers. We know that you have literally been working around the clock for over a year, probably without a day off, nonstop, and that this is a very challenging, unprecedented situation. So thank you to all of you. And we all want to be part of the solution and getting back to work and getting back to the new normal, whatever that may look like. So how can the business community be a part of the solution to assist with achieving max vaccination? We have an audience here of diverse sectors of Niagara businesses. How can they help out?
Yeah, so I think there's a few roles that the business sector could really help out with. I think the first one right up the top is we want to encourage everybody to actually go and get vaccinated. So anything the business community can do to help promote that with their employees through the different community groups that they may be a part of, I think that all helps make sure we get that message and really build that social norm that this is a thing that we are all going to do together as a society because it's going to be the best for us all as a society. I think the next thing that perhaps could be done is that really focusing on, the employees of a particular business is really enabling them to make sure that they're able to get vaccinated. One of the struggles we've had around COVID-19 often has been people feel it's a difficult economic time for lots of people, and they feel they need to go to work sometimes when they're sick, when really they shouldn't be able to. And we wouldn't want people to feel that they need to be at work and not able to go out and get vaccinated or take their family to get vaccinated. And so if there's some sort of provisions that could be made or some way to support workers that they could have time off to go get vaccinated, take their family to get vaccinated, I think that could be really helpful. I think other ways the business could do that is, even set up a day where, they set aside a shuttle bus to take all their employees to get vaccinated and really make sure that everybody gets that opportunity and they all get vaccinated. And then the last part I'd say is that, lots of our business community have links into different parts of society. We might have many minority business owners, we have many women business owners, and they have really unique connections into these networks. And sometimes these might be the communities who may be less sure about getting vaccinated. I particularly think about Toronto, where some of the ethnic populations are less likely to be vaccinated. And if business communities can actually be our way to have an entree into those communities to help encourage them and give us advice on how we can best engage them, I think that could be really helpful to make sure every last pocket in Niagara gets vaccinated.
Thank you. Those are some more really tactical implementable solutions and ideas for our audience and business community to think about today. And I know that's something that the Chamber will continue to engage with the region and the health sector on as well. So that's unfortunately all the time we have for discussion today. It's been really great to talk with all of you about these different ideas and some of the different pressure points in our community, and to get a feel for what's coming next as we aim to build back better and how we can work together. There's a lot more to discuss, and I really hope that our discussion here prompts some more conversations in your workplace and your household today. And from here, I would really like to encourage all of you and all of the audience that's here with us to continue to engage with us at Wynn Council and at the GNCC about these issues and your questions and your concerns, so we can continue to work together to build back our economy, to get people back to work, and to get Niagara moving. We really want to be responsive to the needs and support the business community and everyone that makes up our wonderful place that we call home in Niagara. And on that note, I want to say thank you once again to all of our panelists. Really appreciate your diverse perspectives today, and turn it over to Lindsey Hendriks from the Lincoln Chamber for some closing remarks.
Hello, my name is Lindsey Hendriks, and I'm the Executive Director of the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the Lincoln Chamber, it is my pleasure to be part of the State of the Region 2021. As we conclude today's event, I would like to thank our panelists for approaching today's discussion with substance and insight, a real treat of dialogue that opens our minds to the forces that will shape and determine our path of recovery. Thank you to our moderator, Julie Rorison, founder of the Niagara Leadership Summit for Women and chair of Wynn Council of the GNCC. And thanks to our panelists and regional chair, Jim Bradley. The State of the Region is a collaborative effort of business organizations, and we are pleased to be joined virtually by board leaders and staff executives from across the region. Thank you to Niagara Industrial Association, Niagara Construction Association, Niagara Home Builders Association, Grimsby Chamber of Commerce, Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, and the board and staff of the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce. To all attendees, we thank you for taking part in today's session and taking time out of your day to join us. This event has been recorded and will be available through participating chambers and business associations, and it will be emailed to you directly. Again, thank you to our moderator, panelists, and especially Chair Bradley for today's valuable dialogue. Stay well, stay safe.
And on a closing note, our thanks to the organizations and businesses who made today possible. We are so much better with you by our sides. PenFinancial Credit Union, Electra, Deloitte, Northern Biotech Corporation, Walker Industries, Niagara Regional Broadband Network, FedCap Canada, UTV, and Move 105.7 and Newstalk 610 CKTB. We are at a pivotal moment in time. May it give us the courage to be bold and to be courageous and above all committed to Niagara's economic and social best. Thank you for having joined us today.